That's shamanism in general, in a nutshell. Again, I'm only going to cursorily touch on these. That's all time allows for. The Khemitian tradition. Okay, this is the ancient Egyptian system of moral teachings. The ancient Egyptian system of occult practices and beliefs. The Khemitian people were from Egypt, which was then called Kemet, or Kem, simply Kem. You could say it was Kemet, KMT is how it's transliterated into English. Kem or Kemet means the black land. The word black in Egyptian is Kem. So the original name for Egypt was Kemet. There it is in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Kemet is derived from the word Kem, again, a shortening of Kemet. And the word Kem means black or dark in ancient Egyptian. The term may have referred to the darkness of the soil of ancient Egypt caused by the mineral deposits left by the yearly overflow of the Nile River in the Nile Valley. The English word Egypt is derived from the Greek Aegyptos, which means, that was the Greek word for the ancient capital city of Egypt named Memphis. And that in turn, Aegyptos, which meant Memphis in Greek, the original name in Khemitian or in ancient Egyptian for the city of Memphis was called Hutkapata by the ancient Khemitians themselves. Hutkapata means the temple of the spirit of Ptah. Ptah is one of the highest creator gods in the Egyptian pantheon of gods and goddesses. He was considered a very important creator god. He was actually considered the first and greatest of the alchemists, those from Kem, the teachers from Kem, where the word alchemist and alchemy comes from. So Ptah was considered one of the original master teachers. He is often equivalated with Thoth, with Hermes Trismegistus in different occult traditions. Today, the word that modern Egyptians use for the nation of Egypt is Misr, which is derived from the Hebrew name for Egypt, Mizraim. Mizraim in Hebrew means a narrow place or narrow straits, probably referring to certain areas of the Nile River. But I would suggest that synchromystically, if for no other reason, this name, narrow straits, ultimately refers to the moral teachings of ancient Kem and the Khemitian tradition, because they did teach a strict set of principles regarding natural or moral law. I'll get to that in a moment. I just want to look at some of their symbolism in the example of the Khemitian Trinity. Just like Christianity, which derived its trinity from the ancient Khemitian culture, the Khemitians had a trinity of gods and goddesses, 2 gods and a goddess, to be exact. This was Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Osiris, depicted there in the middle, with atop the pillar, was the creator god of this trinity. He was the Father, God the Father, in other words. But what he symbolically represented in this allegorical symbolism of this trinity was the creative essence of the human being, which is the thought process, the mind. The thing that ultimately has to go to work first for anything to get created. Anything we want to create or put into manifestation has to ultimately work through the mental realm first. You want to build a computer, you want to build a podium, you want to build a home, any piece of technology, it has to exist first in the realm of mind. It has to be thought about archetypally, the need for it, its purpose. Then you have to go through the process of what you're going to do to make that happen and come into manifestation. All mental processes. So creation follows the mind, hence the mind, the thoughts, that's the father figure, the creator God. And that's what Osiris represented. Isis was the goddess figure in this trinity, depicted on the right. She was the divine mother, or in other words, the emotional aspects of the being, the spirit in which we do something, our spiritual essence, the sacred feminine essence. And then when those two things come together, our cares, our desires, our spirit, combined with our mental faculties of the mind, then what happens? We act in the world, and something is generated as a result. And this was Horus. He was the male child because he represented action, the masculine principle. And he was considered the savior figure, the one that was ultimately born to redeem the world through right action. Now, right action is what's ultimately going to redeem the world. And you can only take right action if you have right knowledge about the difference between right and wrong behavior. So he represented right action, that which we do with our body. It's a sacred masculine force. Very powerful if we understand the Trinity as such, that it is just different aspects of our own consciousness, thought, emotion, and action. Again, here's more Khemitian allegorical symbolism through their statues. You see the god Osiris, the creator god, in the middle. And this is representative of the mind, specifically the brain physiology. You have the left brain set on Osiris's left-hand side. Whoever made this graphic, I didn't make the colors in the background, I just found this graphic like this. The person probably already had a very good understanding that this represented the brain, because they actually depicted the frequencies that often represent the left and right brain. Red usually represents the left brain tendencies or capabilities, and blue is usually symbolic of the right brain, the intuitive and creative capacities. So if you put yourself as Osiris in this image on this statue, set the dark god of the dualistic light, the dualistic sun aspect, okay? He was the dark sun. He was the setting sun. That's why his name is Set. The word sunset comes from Set. Okay, so Horus was the rising sun, the solar disk that was coming up into power on the eastern horizon. And as such, he represents the positive aspects of light, or the nurturing aspects of light. Okay, light coming into our presence and operating through the creative mind, operating through the right mind, through the compassionate and nurturing qualities, the sacred feminine, in other words. And Set kind of represents in this image logic and the left brain mental capacities without the balance of that sacred feminine force of truth and upright action that Horus represented. As such, Set was always a mischievous character in the Egyptian pantheon and the Egyptian stories, their allegorical stories. And he fought against Horus and ultimately conquers him and banishes him into the underworld, where they have to do battle. And Horus has to use his willpower to conquer Set and then rise again on the eastern horizon to rejuvenate the world through light and right action. It's an allegory about knowledge and how knowledge can be used for good or ill. And if you use just pure intellect without the balance of the right brain, morality and compassion, then you're going toward a dark path. The Egyptians had no word for death, but in the Khemitian tradition, during the direction that the setting sun was setting over the western horizon, they called, if you had passed on into the next realm, they called it westing. Moving to the west was their term for death. That's it. And again, that's the opposite direction of the rising sun. It's going into a place of darkness and a place of the unknown. And we'll look at that when we look at Freemasonic symbolism a little bit later. Another aspect of the Khemitian tradition was the goddess Ma'at, perhaps one of the most powerful allegorical representations was Ma'at. There was no higher god or goddess than Ma'at, because she represented natural law itself. She was the law. Okay, so the goddess Ma'at represented truth, law, and justice among the Khemitian people. The purpose of coming into harmony with the teachings of Ma'at, this mother goddess figure, was to learn how to avoid self-inflicted chaos by learning the laws of morality, and thus not generating chaos for yourself by choosing wrong action. And the society would thus not generate social chaos by choosing wrong action in the aggregate as a whole culture. They would definitively, objectively know the difference between right and wrong behavior as a whole, and therefore they would embrace Ma'at and not go into a state of self-inflicted chaos. The Khemitians taught what is known as the negative confessions of Ma'at. I call these apophatic confessions, coming from the Greek term apophasis, which means to say that which something is not. To say that which something definitively is not and has nothing to do with and is nothing like. That's the process of apophasis. You're going to say, well, if I want to describe right action, what do I want to really convey about it? I want to say it is the opposite of action that is employed toward a harmful end. It does not create harm to another being when I take that action. That's an apophatic definition of what a right is. Okay? So there was a whole laundry list of apophatic confessions, or in other words, things that you had to say in the afterlife realm to this goddess when you went into the realm of judgment upon dying, that you did not do. She didn't want to know what your works were. She wanted to know what your works were not. So she wanted to look at, here's all the harmful things you could do in a life. I won't read them all. It's a whole, huge, again, list of things. But she wanted to know, did you not engage in these things? And if you did not engage in these things, then I can say you truly were a good being. You truly understood the difference between right and wrong because you didn't do any of these wrong behaviors. Okay, this is what people want to make constant justifications for, and say, oh, we don't need to know the real definitive difference between right and wrong. We could just listen to somebody else or, do what they're telling us to do and take it on faith. To really know natural law is to know what actions we do not have a right to do because taking them is harming another being or their property, their rightful property. So what I would say in my analysis of Khemitian philosophy, particularly when it came to their apophatic sense of morality, is this was the real narrow straits that we're talking about. It was a very narrow pathway that they defined morality to be. And in the story, in the allegorical story of the afterlife, when you went into the hall or chamber of Ma'at, the god Anubis would take the initiate or the dead being's heart, and they would weigh it on Ma'at's scale. And this represented, did they have a light heart? Did they truly understand the difference between right and wrong? Did they try to live that way all the time? Did they not make excuses and justifications? And she would put this feather depicted in her headband there, a blue feather on the other end of the scale. And if the heart outweighed the feather, that meant that the person really did not have a true understanding of morality, and their soul would kind of be recycled and have to go back and learn more spiritual lessons in another life. And if it did weigh either the same or, not outweigh the feather, then the allegorical story was that the being had become a being of light through their knowledge of the difference between right and wrong. And allegorically, the Khemitians taught that then that being would be able to go to a different star system or actually become a star and shine their light to other civilizations. A very beautiful symbolic allegory dealing with morality, specifically an apophatic variant of moral teachings. One other piece of symbolism that I used as the cover image for this seminar was the Great Sphinx of Egypt, who I call the guardian of the mysteries, and many other occultists have referred to as the guardian of the mysteries. Again, some people think that this was originally the image of the original alchemist Ptah, possibly having changed over the years, the visage possibly being weathered away by different natural forces, particularly water. A lot of revisionist Egyptologists and revisionist historians have clearly demonstrated that there were deluges and floodwaters in that part of the world over 10,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago. And the Sphinx's weathering is clearly water-derived. But it looks like the face has been redone on the Sphinx to represent a modern zodiacal reference of Leo combined with Virgo. The